A single desperate act changed 2 lives forever. When a struggling single father stepped between his powerful supervisor and an elderly cleaning woman being humiliated in front of the entire office, he never imagined that defending a stranger would cost him his job before lunchtime. What he also couldn't have known was that the woman everyone dismissed as invisible wasn't just another cleaner. She was quietly watching everything, and by the next sunrise, the people who believed money gave them the right to crush others would discover the devastating price of underestimating kindness. Every weekday morning, Owen Mercer woke before dawn in the small apartment he shared with his 8-year-old daughter, Clara. Life had never been generous to him. 3 years earlier, his wife had passed away after a sudden illness, leaving him to become both father and mother to the little girl who depended on him for everything. Bills piled higher every month, groceries became more expensive, and every paycheck seemed to disappear before it even reached his bank account. Still, Owen refused to complain. He believed that no matter how difficult life became, Clara deserved a father who smiled through the pain and showed her that dignity could survive even the hardest storms. Their mornings followed the same comforting routine. Owen packed Clara's lunch, braided her hair after watching countless online tutorials until he finally learned to do it properly, and slipped encouraging notes into her lunchbox. Those tiny handwritten messages reminded her that she was brave, smart, and deeply loved. Watching her run toward the school entrance with a bright smile gave him enough strength to face another exhausting workday. Owen worked as a logistics coordinator for a large distribution company. The office occupied several floors of a modern glass building, but behind the polished walls lived constant pressure. Employees were expected to work longer hours without complaint, mistakes were punished publicly, and promotions depended more on pleasing management than on talent. At the center of this atmosphere stood the operations director, Victor Holden, a man who believed fear was the best management tool. He spoke sharply, rarely thanked anyone, and treated janitors, receptionists, and cleaners as though they barely existed. Among those invisible workers was an elderly cleaning woman named Eleanor Brooks. She moved slowly because of arthritis, but she arrived before sunrise every morning, carefully polishing floors, emptying trash bins, and quietly greeting everyone with a warm smile that was almost never returned. Most employees hurried past her without making eye contact. Owen always paused to say good morning and thanked her whenever she cleaned around his desk. Eleanor would answer with gentle kindness that somehow made the stressful office feel a little less cold. Over the weeks, Owen noticed little things about her. She remembered everyone's favorite coffee without writing it down. She quietly fixed a loose chair before anyone noticed it was broken. When a young intern burst into tears after making a mistake, Eleanor simply placed a tissue beside her and offered a comforting smile without asking questions. She seemed to understand people in a way few others ever did. One bright Tuesday morning, the warehouse experienced a shipping delay caused by a supplier's computer failure. The entire office buzzed with anxiety as deadlines slipped away. Victor stormed across the floor searching for someone to blame. His anger landed on the wrong person. Eleanor had accidentally left a small cleaning cart near a hallway while replacing a trash bag. Victor kicked the cart aside so hard that bottles rolled across the polished floor. Every conversation stopped. Employees stared at their computer screens, pretending not to notice. Victor loudly accused Eleanor of blocking important business operations and embarrassing the company. His harsh words echoed across the office. The elderly woman immediately apologized and bent down, her stiff hands struggling to collect the scattered supplies. Because of the pain in her knees, she moved slowly. Instead of helping, Victor continued criticizing her, speaking as though she were less valuable than the equipment she carried. Something inside Owen refused to stay silent. He stepped away from his desk, walked across the room, and knelt beside Eleanor to help gather the bottles. Without raising his voice, he calmly reminded Victor that the delayed shipments had nothing to do with a cleaning cart and that humiliating someone who had done nothing wrong would never solve the company's problems. The entire office froze. Nobody had ever challenged Victor in front of everyone. Victor's face turned red with anger. He demanded that Owen return to his desk immediately and apologize. Owen looked at Eleanor's trembling hands and quietly replied that every employee deserved respect, regardless of their job title. Those words sealed his fate. Less than an hour later, Owen was called into the Human Resources office. Victor had already prepared the paperwork. Officially, Owen was dismissed for insubordination and disrupting workplace discipline. His security badge was collected, his company laptop taken away, and he was escorted to the lobby carrying only a cardboard box containing family photographs, a coffee mug Clara had painted in school, and a worn notebook filled with work ideas that would never be used. As the elevator doors closed behind him, Owen wondered how he would explain everything to his daughter. Rent was due in less than 2 weeks. Their savings could barely cover groceries. Fear pressed against his chest, yet one thought refused to leave his mind. If defending someone from cruelty cost him his job, he could still look his daughter in the eyes without shame. Outside the building, Eleanor quietly caught up with him. Her eyes glistened with gratitude. She thanked him for treating her like a human being when everyone else chose silence. Owen smiled gently and told her that kindness should never require courage, even though it often did. She squeezed his hand with surprising confidence and softly said that life had a remarkable way of rewarding people whose hearts remained generous when circumstances encouraged bitterness. Owen appreciated the comforting words, but they could not erase the uncertainty waiting for him at home. That afternoon, Clara immediately sensed something was wrong when her father arrived earlier than usual. Instead of asking difficult questions, she wrapped her small arms around him and whispered that everything would be okay because they still had each other. Her innocent faith nearly brought him to tears. That evening they cooked a simple dinner from the last ingredients in their kitchen. Clara happily spread peanut butter on slices of bread while Owen pretended not to worry about the nearly empty refrigerator. After dinner they completed homework together, laughed over silly spelling mistakes, and ended the evening reading from Clara's favorite adventure book. When she finally fell asleep, Owen remained awake at the kitchen table, searching job listings and calculating expenses over and over. Every number reminded him how close they were to losing everything. The following morning, he dressed in his only suit and prepared for another long day of job hunting. Before leaving, he kissed Clara on the forehead and promised that no matter what happened, they would face it together. As he stepped outside, his phone rang from an unfamiliar number. He hesitated before answering. A calm voice introduced itself as the executive office of the company he had been fired from and requested that Owen return to headquarters immediately. Confused, he assumed they needed additional paperwork. He had no idea that while he slept, the truth about Eleanor Brooks had shaken the entire company, and before the day was over, every person who had witnessed yesterday's humiliation would discover that the quiet cleaning woman they had ignored was, in fact, the company's true chief executive, living undercover to learn how employees were really treated when no one believed leadership was watching. Owen stood silently on the sidewalk, staring at his phone long after the call had ended. It felt impossible to believe. Only yesterday he had walked out of the building carrying a cardboard box, convinced that the chapter of his life at the company had ended forever. Now someone from the executive office was asking him to return immediately. He assumed there had been a mistake with paperwork or perhaps they needed him to sign additional termination documents. Whatever the reason, he straightened his jacket, took one last look toward Clara's school in the distance, and quietly hoped that somehow the day would bring more than another disappointment. When Owen entered the company lobby, the atmosphere was completely different from the day before. Employees who had avoided looking at him now watched him with surprise. Conversations stopped as he walked past the reception desk. Even the security guard who had collected his badge the previous afternoon greeted him with an awkward smile. Before Owen could ask any questions, an assistant escorted him to the executive boardroom on the top floor, a place ordinary employees rarely saw. The large doors opened, and Owen froze. Sitting at the head of the polished conference table was Eleanor Brooks. The faded cleaning uniform was gone. In its place was a simple but elegant navy business suit. Her silver hair was neatly styled, and the gentle smile he had seen every morning remained exactly the same. Around her sat the company's board of directors, senior executives, and legal advisors. Every person in the room stood respectfully as she entered. Only then did Owen understand. Eleanor was not a cleaner. She was the founder and majority owner of the company. Years earlier, after stepping away from day-to-day management, she had secretly begun visiting different branches disguised as a cleaning employee. She believed that quarterly reports and polished presentations could never reveal the true character of an organization. The only way to understand how people treated one another was to become someone everyone overlooked. For months she had quietly watched everything. She saw managers who thanked employees and others who ruled through fear. She saw workers who helped struggling co-workers and others who stepped over people to climb the corporate ladder. Most painfully, she watched how invisible service staff were treated by those who believed their titles made them important. Yesterday had confirmed everything she feared. Victor Halden had not simply embarrassed a cleaner. He had revealed the culture he had built. The security footage had already been reviewed. Witness statements had been collected. Every cruel word, every humiliating gesture, and every employee's reaction had been documented. Victor was called into the room moments later. The confidence he usually carried had disappeared. He tried to explain that he had been under pressure because of delayed shipments and claimed that his actions had been misunderstood. Eleanor calmly stopped him. She reminded him that pressure never creates character. It only reveals it. She explained that every employee deserved dignity, whether they worked in the executive offices or emptied waste bins before sunrise. Leadership, she said, was measured not by authority but by compassion. Without raising her voice, she announced that Victor's employment was terminated effective immediately for creating a toxic workplace, abusing employees, and violating the company's ethical standards. The room remained silent. Then Eleanor turned toward Owen. She thanked him for doing something almost no one else had done. He had defended someone who appeared to have nothing to offer him. He had stood up knowing there could be consequences. He had chosen integrity over security. She admitted that she had expected at least one senior manager to intervene during Victor's outburst. None had. Only a struggling single father with every reason to protect his own paycheck had found the courage to speak. Owen lowered his eyes, embarrassed by the praise. He quietly admitted that he had simply done what he hoped his daughter would one day be proud of. Those words touched everyone in the room. Eleanor smiled warmly before making an announcement that surprised even the board members. Owen's termination was immediately cancelled. He would receive full back pay. More importantly, he was being offered a newly created position as Director of Employee Culture and Operations, reporting directly to the executive office. His mission would be to help rebuild a workplace where respect mattered as much as results. The salary was nearly double what he had earned before. Health insurance would fully cover Clara. Flexible hours would allow him to spend afternoons with his daughter. For several seconds Owen could not speak. Tears filled his eyes as years of exhaustion, fear, and quiet sacrifice finally caught up with him. He accepted the offer with gratitude, promising that he would never forget what the opportunity truly represented. The changes inside the company happened quickly. Mandatory leadership training focused on empathy rather than intimidation. Anonymous employee feedback became a permanent part of performance reviews. Cleaning staff, maintenance workers, receptionists, and warehouse employees were invited to company meetings for the first time. Managers were evaluated not only by profits but also by the well-being of their teams. Slowly, the atmosphere transformed. People greeted one another in the hallways. Departments began working together instead of competing. Employee turnover dropped dramatically. Productivity increased naturally because people finally felt respected. A few weeks later, Eleanor asked Owen to join her during lunch in the company cafeteria instead of the executive dining room. She explained that success had nearly caused her to forget what ordinary employees experienced every day. Disguising herself as a cleaner had reminded her that the greatest danger facing any leader was becoming disconnected from the people whose work made success possible. Owen thanked her for believing in him. She smiled gently and corrected him. She had not believed in him because he defended her. She believed in him because he defended someone he thought could never repay him. That was the kind of person every organization needed. Months passed. Life at home changed as well. Owen no longer worried every time the mail arrived with another bill. The refrigerator stayed full. Clara joined the art club she had always wanted to attend. One Saturday afternoon she proudly handed her father a framed drawing she had made at school. It showed a tall tree sheltering a smaller one beneath its branches during a storm. At the bottom she had written in careful handwriting, "Strong people protect others." Owen held the picture against his chest, realizing that children often understood life's greatest lessons more clearly than adults. The drawing found a permanent place on the wall of his office. Whenever difficult decisions appeared, he looked at it and remembered why kindness always mattered more than convenience. 1 year later, the company held its annual employee celebration. Instead of honoring only sales records and financial achievements, the highest award recognized acts of compassion. The first recipient was chosen unanimously. As Owen walked onto the stage, he expected to receive the award alone. Instead, Eleanor invited every cleaner, receptionist, maintenance worker, warehouse employee, and office assistant to join him. Standing together, they received a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. No one was invisible anymore. Looking across the room, Owen saw Clara smiling proudly beside Eleanor. In that moment he realized that losing his job had never been the end of his story. It had been the beginning of a better one. Sometimes life closes one door only because a far greater one is waiting to be opened by a single act of courage. And sometimes the person the world overlooks is quietly watching, waiting to discover who will choose kindness when no reward seems possible. Years later, employees would still tell new hires about the day one ordinary father risked everything to defend an elderly cleaning woman. They never described it as the day a CEO tested her company. They remembered it as the day kindness defeated fear. Because true character is revealed when helping someone offers no advantage, and the greatest victories in life are often won not through power, wealth, or influence, but through the simple decision to stand beside another human being when everyone else walks away.